Today's video is my top 5 lessons learned from the coronavirus pandemic and living in lockdown in the UK. All 5 of these tips cover financial and non-financial lessons, so stay tuned because I feel like I've got everybody covered here. Let's roll the intro. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Capitalist Investor YouTube channel. It's me, the Capitalist Investor, here bringing you another video on this channel. First of all, I just wanted to apologise that I haven't uploaded this week. It's been a pretty busy week in terms of work-related things, and therefore I've struggled to find time to actually make a video. But it's Sunday today, and I've smashed this video out, and it's going to be out with you this evening, and I hope to make a couple more so that I've got some more uploads throughout the week. This video was really inspired by a period of reflection, I think, and just thinking about what I've learned in this pandemic. So before we get into the video, if I can just remind you guys, if you can hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, that will really help the YouTube algorithm for this video. As I said, this video is going to cover both financial and non-financial lessons learned, so it's going to be appealing to anyone, whether you're a novice investor, an experienced investor, or you've never invested before in your life. Whether you have anything to do with finances or you don't, this video will give you at least one lesson that can either help you financially or non-financially. I also want to say a massive thank you to everyone who is subscribed to the channel. We've reached 300 subscribers, which is fantastic and far exceeded my expectations when I started this channel. I started this channel back in sort of December, November time last year, uploaded maybe 2-3 times, then stopped. But I started again during lockdown, and the growth that I've seen in subscribers is fantastic. And let's keep that subscriber train going by hitting that subscribe button. Thank you. So my first lesson that I learned during the lockdown was the importance of an emergency fund. An emergency fund, for those of you that don't know, is effectively a fund or a pool of cash that you have that sits in reserves or sits on the side. Some may refer to it as a savings account, which effectively you're going to need to use in your time of difficulty. Now, we would have expected that many people that have emergency funds have probably dipped into them during this lockdown that we've seen in the UK. And this can be for a number of reasons. I suspect one of the most common reasons is around the furlough scheme, and so many people in the UK being put onto the furlough scheme, where in the UK you received 80% of your normal salary from the government. Now, a lot of people, believe it or not, in the UK live from month to month, and therefore the cash that they need from their salary pays for their rent and other expenses they need. And actually, if there's a shortfall in that, and okay, they didn't lose their job, but a shortfall from 100% down to 80% would have meant that there was actually a deficit in the amount that they had to be able to continue to pay crucial things like rent and other expenses. And if it's not possible to bridge that gap through non-essential purchases like, nights out and things like that, then they would have needed to have done this through another way. And another way would have been an emergency fund. Because at this time, if you've got a pot of money, which they typically say should be 3 to 6 months worth of fundamental expenses, then you can start to draw on some of that money to help supplement the 80% to the 100%. However, what is even more disheartening is that a majority of people in the UK don't actually have an emergency fund, which is crazy, but I can understand it. If you're living from month to month and paying your bills, month to month, and you have no additional income that you can put to the side, then I get it. You can't have an emergency fund if you don't have the ability to do that. But I think what we're trying to do on this channel, give you money saving ideas, tips, thoughts. An emergency fund is so powerful, and people that have had one during this lockdown will realise the benefits of it. Now, me personally, I've not actually had to dip into my emergency fund during lockdown, although I have had to consider it. And the main reason is I haven't been put on furlough. My job is relatively safe within the accounting industry, and my employers thankfully didn't put anyone on furlough, which is fantastic. However, the thought process then, for me, in my particular situation was, well, I don't need to change my saving or investing habits, but naturally I'm saving more from not having to commute to the office or to client sites. And actually, I'm not spending things on ad hoc things like a night out, for instance, at the pub, because everything's closed, which a lot of you will have probably been in this situation as well. So what was the dilemma I had? Well, the money that I had saved in my emergency fund was 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. But then what happened was the stock market fell off a cliff. And most of you who are putting your money in investments such as stocks and shares will have noticed that from sort of March, peak time for when coronavirus was, up until sort of May time, the market just tanked. And that meant that my portfolio analysis, and you can go back and look at some of my portfolio reviews for each month through the pandemic, I'll leave a card up here. You'll see that effectively most of your portfolio eroded away in the space of days and weeks. And anyone who knows Warren Buffett's famous quote, when to be fearful when greedy, and that was, for those of you that don't know, it's be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful. We'll know that at times when the market crashes like that and you believe in the fundamentals of the business, you should put more money into the businesses. So I wanted to effectively use that cash buffer that I had in my emergency fund and put it into my stocks and shares ISA and start buying this dip that we had. Well, I think that's where I had to sort of argue with myself, because that emergency fund isn't to fund more investments that are more risky. That emergency fund is basically, if everything goes wrong and I need money, that is my cash pool to draw upon. And I had to stop myself and I had to say, no, that money is in a separate account that can't be used for investment purposes. So unfortunately, this is it's a dip and I want to buy in it, but I can only buy in it from my normal savings and investments that I put in monthly. And actually, funny enough, in my free trade account, I did have a buffer worth of cash that I could then deploy into the market, which shrunk my cash position. But I did stop myself from using the emergency fund to fund further investments. And I think that's a sensible move. And I think what's more worrying is people don't have an emergency fund. And what would be more worrying is people that are investing and don't have an emergency fund. And I say that because although stocks and shares you can sell at any point, if a market crash comes along and you need to pull that money out, you're going to lose, say 20% of the value of that pot straight away from the coronavirus or whatever is affecting the market at that period of time. And so if you had, say £10,000 in there, which was effectively your 3 to 6 months worth of expenses, and the value of it extremely drops to 50% of that, you've only got £5,000, which is now only 1 to 2 months worth of expenses. And you can see where the issue comes. And some people will have had to have made that decision, and some people will have had to have drawn down investments, sold investments at a loss, and not allowed the market to recover to get back to the position they were in before. And that really is the stark reason why an emergency fund is so important. And that's why I believe an emergency fund is so important. You wouldn't have needed to sell those investments like myself. You can just hold them there. You'd have had to, reluctantly not pulled money from that emergency fund into your investments, but you've basically set yourself up correctly. And that's why fundamentally one of the main things when people say to me, I want to invest, I always say, please have an emergency fund before you even start to think about investing. So lesson number 2 is very similar to lesson number 1 and follows on from lesson number 1. And this lesson is directly impacted me during this pandemic and lockdown that we've had. And that is called catching a falling knife. And that doesn't mean walking into the kitchen and dropping a knife and catching it, because that would be stupid. But it's something of a investing phrase, which effectively says, you see your stock start to decrease and you start to buy more of it, but you lose track of the fundamental underlying data of the stock and you just continue to buy a stock that is falling. And so I've got a practical example of this for my portfolio, which was Carnival PLC. So I bought in relatively high on that at around £30 a share, and this was before the pandemic. I then started to read that, they were having issues with the pandemic and coronavirus was on some of their cruise ships, and, their stock price started to tank. So I thought, great, as an investor, I already like this company. I'm just going to buy more of it because it's even cheaper. What I didn't realize is that stock just continued to drop. So I bought in at £18, £15, and it just continued to drop. And that's what they refer to as catching a falling knife. I'd lost track of the fundamentals of the business and just believed it was a good business based on what I already knew beforehand. But actually this business was no longer trading. There were no cruise ships going on. It had significant debt and, it was struggling to even be able to see itself out towards the end of the year. And eventually that stock price then fell down to below £10. So if you think I bought in at 30 to £35 and it's dropped to £10, I've lost a significant chunk of the capital that I've put into it. So at that point, you need to rebase and look at what the fundamentals are saying. And I've talked about it on previous videos around now my cost base for Carnival being around £9. And if it falls to £9, I'd purchase more of it. But if I didn't have those fundamentals behind me, I'd purely be catching a falling knife. And I'm sure many other investment YouTube channels have talked about this and know and can resonate with this issue. But a lesson learned nonetheless. The third lesson is around the importance of passive income and job security. So many people have lost their jobs during the coronavirus and will continue to do so going forward as we enter recessions and tough times for people. And this really, to me, the lesson here is around passive income and building something else that is supporting you outside of your normal work duties. Now, that doesn't have to be everyone start a YouTube channel, but there are different ways that you can start to grow a passive income stream. So for instance, I've created this YouTube account, and although at the moment I can't, generate ad revenue, I've got affiliate links in my descriptions below. And if people were kind enough to click on those, sign up or purchase something through them, I get a small commission, and that is passive income to me. It's not truly passive because I have to obviously make the videos, but it is a passive building income stream. Other income streams might be dividends. So for instance, I invest in stocks and shares and they pay me a dividends, and I get paid, monthly from different dividend streams. That's building a passive income. So I'm starting to build up these passive incomes that are taking away the burden from if I was to lose my job, or if I had to take a pay cut, or if there was other things, I'm not becoming reliant on just my job. I think there is further consideration here though around the reliability of the passive income. So for instance, we've already talked about the stock market crashing. And when the stock market crashes or there's economic downturn, companies stop paying their dividends, and therefore that passive income can quickly disappear. As we saw with Lloyds Bank, who I held a significant portion of my portfolio in before COVID-19 came along, and they subsequently cancelled their dividend or cut their dividend, suspended their dividend, thanks to the Bank of England, and therefore I wasn't actually getting that dividend or passive income anymore. YouTube's a bit more stable like that. And the next thing I'm starting to look at and research is around property. And I'd really like to start buying my first buy to let in the next 12 months. The fourth lesson is around setting a budget and sticking to a budget. Now, everyone's been at home, working from home or furloughed. So not traveling out, not, paying for commuting, not paying for lunches and things like that. So a lot of people will have actually saved money during this. But it's astonishing the number of times I see a delivery driver just coming into the cul-de-sac that I live in to deliver Amazon parcels, Boohoo parcels, any parcels. People seem to be online ordering even more. And what people should really be doing is paying down any high interest debt and saving that money in an emergency fund. So you can see how all these lessons are sort of linked to one another. If people use that money to set aside, budgets and things, and set aside how much they would have or how much they needed to have in an emergency fund, this would help them in the future. But effectively, they've maintained some high level percentage of debt, and they're effectively generating no additional income to pay that off. They're effectively just making themselves more in debt by purchasing other things. And it's a psychological thing. And I know the consumer works in that way. We're advertised purely on social medias and things to buy. But it's about thinking about cutting back on those things to see a future benefit. And a lockdown or, the equivalent is a great time to start to think about that and get your finances in place. And for me, what I did, it wasn't necessarily setting a budget because I already have a budget in place, in terms of where my money goes, in terms of a salary going towards mortgage payments, other expenses such as food, etc. And then I always have this amount that I basically pay myself with, which goes into my investment account because I've already got my emergency fund at a suitable level that I'm happy with. So effectively, my expenses were going down because I wasn't commuting, paying for, lunches, etc. So I had this additional amount of money that I could effectively put into a savings account and earn pretty much no interest, or I could start to deploy in the investment market. And that's what I did. And for those of you that have checked out my portfolio updates, you'll see that my cash deployment within March to May was significant. And it was really driven by, sticking to the budget that I already had, but not then as my spare income increased, I didn't then increase the amount of spending habits. Although I didn't skimp on that either, and I actually did buy a Nintendo Switch during the pandemic, but you do have to treat yourself every once in a while. So lesson number 5, here we are. It's the final one, and it's about mental health and looking after yourself. Now, staying in and being locked in for long periods of time can have a detrimental effect on people's mental health. And I've noticed that, I don't have to worry about necessarily my job at the moment, or job security, or being put on furlough and whether I can pay my bills and things. My mental health didn't stem from that, but being locked up in my house for what seemed like a long period of time, not being able to go and meet friends was quite tough. And actually, what I found really tough was not being able to break down the work and home life balance, because now I was effectively in the same place doing work and home life. And starting off during the pandemic, I was working at the kitchen table downstairs, and it just didn't work because my mind frame wasn't right, because I was working from home, but I was at home. So I quickly changed that up and built a custom-made office in the spare bedroom that we've got. And I used that to separate myself from home and work life. And things have improved from that. The second thing I learned is the importance of just exercise and getting out there and getting fresh air. Now, at the beginning of the lockdown, Boris Johnson said, look, you can go out and have one session of fitness a day. You can go outside for one session a day. So I was like, right, okay, well, I have to do that, because if I don't do that, I'm going to be stuck in this house all day. I'm going to work from 9 till 9 in the evening, and my brain is just going to, it's going to self-destruct effectively. So I made use of going out, and we actually got a dog during lockdown, which was pretty awesome. And that drove me even more to go out, walk the dog, make sure I was getting exercise and just getting fresh air. And the importance of that on mental health cannot be misunderstood. The final thing I sort of implemented, and I was already doing it before, but I implemented it more rigidly, was around trying to switch off before going to sleep. Now, what I found from right at the beginning, when my work-home life balance wasn't quite right, I was having quite bad dreams, which sounds quite weird, but I think it was down to not being able to, split home and work life, not much exercise, waking up, working, going to sleep, waking up, working, going to sleep. And it was just messing my brain up, basically. And the period before you go to sleep, I would just sit on my phone and scroll through social media, not really do much, but my eyes were just, a laptop all day, then my phone in the evening, and then I'd sleep. And my brain was obviously not liking that. So I implemented just reading a book before bed. So when I get into bed, I set my alarm for the next day, I put my phone down, and I read at least 2 chapters of a book that I'm into at the moment. Now, not only is this helping me in terms of sleeping, my sleeping is 100% better, but also my knowledge is increasing. Because I'm reading books such as The Intelligent Investor, which is sat over there, but I'm also reading Property Magic now that I've finished The Intelligent Investor. So yeah, really good things. And the importance of mental health during the lockdown and coronavirus is huge. And these are just some of the things that have affected me. Now, I know there could be much worse for other people who, for one, live on their own, don't have the ability to create a separate space for, for their office. For those of you that during lockdown couldn't go out and exercise, or because you were in a 5-story building and, you weren't allowed to use the lifts and things like that, or whatever accessibility reasons, for whatever reason, people are in a much worse position than me, but looking after your mental health is so important, guys. So that's it for today's video. That was 5 lessons that I've learned during the lockdown and COVID-19 in the UK. Now, there were lessons in there were anecdotes in there, but hopefully there was something that resonates with you, whether that be financial or non-financial. I hope you found something useful in this video. Let me know in the comments below what lessons you've learned from the coronavirus and what things you're taking forward with you now, having learned from the coronavirus. There is no doubt that the world has changed as a result of the coronavirus, and we will continue to learn things as things progress. It really does mean the world to me, the people that have stayed with me until the end of this video. And for you guys, here's a bonus lesson number 6, which is if you subscribe to the Capitalist Investor YouTube channel, you get the best free content delivered to you if you turn the notification bell on every single week, and it's free. So that is lesson number 6, guys. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. That's it for today's video, guys. I've been the Capitalist Investor. As always, you've been YouTube. And until next time, peace.